Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Kuf Mem of Masechta Shabbos, Daf 140. Friends, we're getting pretty close. 140, and that like one out of 157. That's like within I don't know, if you think about it in like groups of 10, we're only like one group of 10 away. Yeah, pretty exciting. It's a cool Daf today, friends. Yeah, I guess like a Gothic kind of thing. It's it's not too heavy, not too difficult. We start off talking about mixing mustard. I almost view like this mixing mustard almost like we have like our trina. You get like this like trina golmit, this like paste that you then mix with water and like mix together. I'm kind of imagining that somehow for their mustard, but let's see. Then we talk about all sorts of different recipes, which is very interesting. Some of them sound lemaisa not too bad. All right. Then we talk about soaking stuff in warm water to like make medicine, and rubbing linen garments like make them softer and cleaner. And then on Kuf Mem Amud Beis, Rav Hisda gives all sorts of advice for cash-strapped students. And then we get to a new Mishnah at the end. So all exciting stuff today. Friends, let's get started. We will begin on the very, very last line of Taf Kuf Lamed Tes Amud Beis. It says that our Mishnah said that you are permitted to put an egg through a mustard strainer. Tani Yaakov Korcha lefishein osin osa ela ligavein. So Rabbi Yaakov Korcha. So he says, well, because putting this egg through. So what happens? You put the egg through the strainer, and what happens is the yolk kind of goes through the strainer, and the egg white stays on top. And he says that this isn't ochel mitoch psolos because they're both ochel, right? It's not like you're trying to remove good from bad. They're both good, just that the yolk can be a dye. It could provide coloring, and that's what you're looking for. So it's not necessarily borer. That's why it's acceptable. Okay? Itmar, it was stated chardal shaloshu me'ev Shabbos. Okay, so it sounds like if you, I honestly, I don't know exactly the processing over here, but it sounds like basically if you take mustard seeds and you add some water and knead it together to some extent already before Shabbos, maybe you make some kind of like paste of sorts before Shabbos. So l'machar, so now on Shabbos, Amar Rav memachu b'chli avalo b'yad. You'd be allowed to, I think, add some water to it and then use a kli, let's say a spoon, to like mix it around, but don't use your hands. The assumption being that that using your hands would knead it better, and that would be the way that you would do it during the week. So we don't want you to do it the way that you would do it during the week. So rather use a vessel instead, like a spoon maybe. Amalei Shmuel. Shmuel disagrees with Rab. Biyad. What do you mean that you're going to knead it with your hands? What do you mean knead it with your hands during the week? Atukol yoma mimachule biyad meichel chamorimu. What, during the entire week you're going to use your hands to knead this mustard? What is it, donkey food that you're going to knead it with your hand? No, rather says Shmuel that the way to mix this mustard during the week would be with a kli. And therefore, on Shabbos, if you want to make a shinoi, you can do it with your hand. So, Itmar, it was stated Rabbi Elazar Amar Echad Zeh Vechad Zeh Aser, Rabbi Yochanan Amar Echad Zeh Vechad Zeh Mutter. So it was stated that Rabbi Elazar says that whether you use your hand, whether you use a kli, it's forbidden. Rabbi Yochanan says that whether you use your hand, whether you use a kli, it is permitted. Abai v'Rava Damar Tarvau Ein Halacha Rabbi Yochanan. Abai and Rava both say that the halacha is not like Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said that both with a kli and with your hand is permitted. Abai and Rava say the halacha is certainly not like that. Kam Rabbi Yochanan should say the Rabbi Elazar, Kam Rabbi Elazar should say the Shmuel. But then what happened was, Rabbi Yochanan jumped sides, and he ended up saying like Rabbi Elazar that both with a kli and with your hand is going to be forbidden to make this mustard. And Rabbi Elazar then said like Shmuel, which is that with your with a kli is also, but with your hand is mutter. Abai v'Rava Damar Tarvau Halacha Rabbi Yochanan. Abai and Rava now both say, well, then the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan, that both with a kli and with your hand is forbidden. Fine. Imei de Abai Avdele v'lo achal. Abaye's nurse made for him this like mustard stuff on Shabbos, And he didn't eat it because he said that, whether it's Bekli, whether it's Biyad, it's awesome. The Visud is Ze'ira. So as we saw on Daf Kuftes Amud Aleph, so a similar case that Ze'ira's wife made, in this case, this mustard paste for Reb Chia bar Ashi, and he didn't eat it either. Amrle, she said to him, L'rabach avidile ve'achal vatlo achal. So Ze'ira's wife said to Reb Chia bar Ashi, says, I make this for your teacher Ze'iri, and he eats it. Why won't you eat it? Okay. Amar Rava bar Shiva, hava ka'im nekami de Ravina, uvachshile b'shufsa desuma ve'achal. Okay, says Rava bar Shiva that he was in front of Ravina, and what he did was he mixed together this mustard stuff with he mixed it using not a kli, not his hands, but rather like garlic, like a shoot of garlic, and Ravina ate it. Okay, Baruch Hashem. Over Marzutra, says Marzutra, Le'sichsa kholani shmaitza ella kiad itmar. So Marzutra says the halacha is not like all these people, rather the halacha is the following, which is Chardol Shalashim Erev Shabbos, that if you already mixed together, I guess it's like a paste, this mustard on Erev Shabbos, L'machar Memacho, Bein Biyad, Bein Bekli, so then the next day you'd be allowed to add water and mix it together, whether you use your hand, whether you use a Kli, it's all good. V'nosin L'socho Dvash, you could put in some honey. V'lo Yitrof Ela Ma'ariv. Now just don't, mix it together really solid, just mix it together loosely. And this reminds me of trina, when you make trina, so you pour out the kind of thicker trina that you buy in the store from the jar. Then you add water and whatever else you want to add to it. But you shouldn't make it into a really thick kind of paste. Rather you just kind of lightly mix it together so that it doesn't get too thick. So I imagine it like a similar kind of thing. Shichlaim, when it comes to cress, these leafy kind of greeny kind of things. So cress, sheshachkan me'erev Shabbos, that you already chopped them up from Erev Shabbos, l'machar, then on Shabbos, nos in the sochen shemen v'chometz, you could put in oil and vinegar, umamshich l'sochen amisa, you could put in amisa, which we're going to define in a few minutes as mint. V'lo yitrof el ma'ariv, don't mix it up really strong, but rather just mix it together kind of looser. Which is very interesting, right? It doesn't sound so bad. Some leaves with some oil, vinegar, mint. Sounds kind of nice. Shum sherisko me'erev Shabbos. If you have garlic that you made into some kind of that you crushed before Shabbos, l'machar, then on Shabbos, nosin l'socho pool v'grisen. You could put in beans, and so grisen in modern Hebrew I think is barley, but he was defining it as oh man, I can't even remember anymore. What was it? Beans and... can't even remember. Does Rashi say anything about grisen? Oh. Alright. Yeah, the article I think defined it as something else. I can't even remember what it is anymore. But in modern Hebrew, grisen are like barley. And it's v'lo yishchok ela me'ariv. Now don't smush all this stuff together, rather just mix it. Umamshichas amisa l'sochan ma'amisa. What is this amisa that we said you could put into it? Ninya, it is mint. Amar Abaye shmamina hay ninya ma'ayel l'sachle. So Abaye says, no. So what do we see? We see that mint is good for cress. Well, there you have it. That's the halacha. Abaye paskin, mint is good for cress. What do you mean you don't like it? Of course you like it. Who says you don't like it? Abaye says it's good, it's good. Alright. V'osin inomlin b'Shabbos. This is interesting. You can make these inomlin on Shabbos. Taner Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, osin inomlin b'Shabbos, ve'nosin ilontis. Alright? You're allowed to make inomlin on Shabbos. You're not allowed to make ilontis on Shabbos. No, so what are these things? So ve'ezru inomlin, ve'ezru ilontis. Inomlin, yayin, udvash, ufilplin. That sounds very fancy, right? Inomlin is wine with some honey and some black pepper. That sounds kind of nice. I don't know. I mean, I don't usually go for that stuff, but I'm imagining a party in the winter with lots of people around, and there's that big pot of hot wine and stuff. It kind of feels like that. Is there a name for that hot wine stuff, or is it just called hot wine? I'm not usually so into it, but I don't know. It seems nice enough. Ilontis, what's ilontis? Yain yashan, it's like old wine. Umayim tzlulin, and you add like some clear water to it. Vafarsimon, and some balsam. Also sounds pretty nice. Davdele leve mesusa, and you have it at the end of the spa. After you go to the bathhouse, you have this drink. Lemekar, to cool down. Amr of Yosef, says of Yosef, Zimnachada, all his basar Mar Ukva levebane. Rav Yosef said that one time he went with Mar Ukva to the bathhouse. Now, the Rashi had said on Daf, I think it was Daf Nun Daled Amud Beis, Rashi had said that Mar Ukva was a very wealthy man, and he was also the head of the Beis Din. So he was so I guess Rav Yosef had the treat of one time he was hanging out with Mar Ukva, and Mar Ukva took him to the spa. Now Kinafke, when they came out, Asai, Ashakyon, Chad Kasa, they went and they drank 1 cup of this. I'm skipping the word chamra because it's better without it, and the Gilyon removes it. So, or some people remove it. So, and they drank 1 cup of this inomlin, v'choshi mibinta deroshi vad tufa dechari. And Rav Yosef says this drink was mamish something else. I cooled down from the hairs of my head to my toenails. The ashakyan kasa achrina, and if I were to have drank another cup of this inomlin, have I mistafina, I would be nervous. Mankuli mizchusa de alma de asi. I would be nervous that if I would have another one of these cups of this drink, I would cool down so much that I might die, and in order to stay alive, they would have to reduce from my reward in the world to come. Interesting. What do you mean? That why would Rav Yosef had died and they would have to keep him alive only by reducing from his reward in the world to come? After all, Mar Ukva drinks this every single day. Shiny Mar Ukva didashbe. Well, Mar Ukva is accustomed to drinking such drinks. So therefore, it wasn't, particularly, it wasn't, he was used to it. He built up a tolerance. So it wasn't as potent. But for other people, it would be very potent. Interesting. Says the Mishnah, in shorin es chiltis beposhon. So there's some kind of chiltis thing. The art school explained it as something that is gibberish to me. But there's some kind of substance that you were to soak in warm water. So you don't do that on Shabbos because it would be clear that it was for refuah. Avanosin socha chometz, but you can put it in vinegar, and then you can dip things into the vinegar, even though the qualities of the chiltis will be infused into the vinegar. Ve'ein sholin es akarshinin, and you can't soak vetch in water to remove whatever vetch was some kind of legume that they would feed to animals. So don't soak it in water to remove whatever you want to remove from the vetch. Below shafin osan, and you can't scrape it with your hand either, because we're concerned about borer, separating good from bad, or bad from good, separating or selecting. Aval nosein lesocha kvara or lesocha kakala, but you would be allowed to put the vetch into a sifter or into a basket. Now, not with the intention of sifting, because that would be a problem, but you could put it into the sifter and then just keep it there, and just take a whole bunch, chuck it in a sifter, but not actually sift it. And then even if some of it ends up getting sifted, it's fine because it's davar she'einu miskaven. It's not obvious that stuff is going to get sifted. Or into a basket, and in the basket also some stuff might fall through, but that's acceptable. And kovrin is a tevin bichvara. We do not take grain and put it in a sifter in order to remove the chaff. Also, don't put it in a high area, bishvil sheyered hamotz, so that the chaff will fall out. Aval nosinu b'chvar v'nosinu socha evas. But what you can do is you can take this grain and put it in a sifter, and then from the sifter chuck it into the trough that the animals are going to eat from, and whatever falls through the sifter in that process would be acceptable. Fine. Ibai lehu, they ask a kasha. Shara mai. What happens if somebody did in fact soak this chiltis in warm water? Is it chayav korban chatas? Is it patur aval aser? So, because we said in the Mishnah not to do it because it looks like it's for refuah. So, Tirgama Rav Ada Nar Sha'a, Kamid Rav Yosef, so Rav Ada Nar Sha'a taught in front of Rav Yosef, Shara Chayav Chatas, that if he soaks this chiltis in warm water, well then he's chayiv a korban chatas. So Abaye apparently just gives like some random case. He says, what do you mean? Well, if I take meat and soak that in warm water, would I be chayiv? Basically what Abaye is saying is like, what are you talking about that you're going to be chayiv a korban chatas for soaking this chiltis in warm water? I'm not chayiv for korban chatas for soaking things in water. No, rather don't soak the point is that we don't want you doing things like the way that you do it during the week, and therefore don't soak this stuff in water. Although we did say that it has to do with like refuah, but I guess the point is that like if you're doing, meaning the point is that you're certainly not being over on an Isser d'Oraisa by soaking something in water. What Isser d'Oraisa are you doing? The point is that we don't want you doing things, I guess, the way you would prepare this refuah, I guess, during the week. We don't want you doing it on Shabbos, so therefore don't soak it. But I guess putting it in vinegar would be acceptable. But Abai says it's only an Isser d'Rabbanan. You're certainly not chayiv korban chatos. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yanai. This is interesting. So Rabbi Yochanan asked a kasha from Rabbi Yanai. Now, Rabbi Yanai was older than Rabbi Yochanan. So this is interesting for a few reasons, because often Rabbi Yochanan is like one of those characters in the personalities in the Gemara that is like Rav and Shmuel, like they're like the top of the food chain. You don't usually see, sometimes you see like Rav with his uncle Rabbi Chia, or Shmuel maybe with Levi, as we saw yesterday. But, Rabbi Yochanan is pretty high up, and here's an interesting interaction with Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yanai, who is even older than he is. So, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yanai. So Rabbi Yochanan asked Rabbi Yanai, "Ma'u lishros asachiltes bitzonin." Can you soak this chiltis in cold water, right? Meaning the Mishnah said don't put it in warm water. But what about in cold water? So Amalei Osir. Rabbi Yanai said to Rabbi Yochanan, forbidden. You're not allowed to soak this chiltis in cold water. Ve'anatnan in shorin es achiltis b'poshrin, habitzonin mutter. So Rabbi Yochanan then said to Rabbi Yanai, he said, but our Mishnah, after all, only said not to soak the chiltis in warm water, implying that cold water would be permitted. To which Rabbi Yanai said, if that's the case, if you're gonna kind of come to me with Mishnayos that everybody knows, and when I give you an answer that's different than the Mishnah, you're kind of questioning me about it, or you're assuming that I don't know about that Mishnah, or that I'm not giving you the correct answer, well then there would be no difference between me and you. The whole point is that I'm greater than you. Meaning there's a reason that you're coming to me to ask questions, because I know a little bit more. And Masnis and Hidahi, the fact of the matter is that Mishnah that is very popular and that everybody knows is actually only a das yachid. The Tanya, as we learn in the Brisa, in Shoynes achiltis lo b'cham lo b'tzonin Rabbi Yossi Omer b'cham and also b'tzonin mutter. That we actually have a Brisa that says that according to the Tanakama, we do not soak this chiltis whether in cold water, whether in warm water. We don't soak it at all. Rabbi Yossi is the one who says that only in warm water it is asur, but in cold water it is permitted. Which is very interesting, because also I feel like we've seen before in other places that like Mishnayos were kind of more popular. Brises were not necessarily as well known. And so it's interesting to see how kind of like, Rabbi Yochanan kind of knew the Mishnah. And when he came to Rabbi Yanai, who was like, his Rebbe, who was greater than him, Rabbi Yanai was able to kind of bring in a broader perspective and more knowledge, and being able to bring that to the table, which is also just interesting. Also, like when it comes to Psak Halacha, like you kind of wonder, how come different poskim could say different things? Doesn't everybody just go based on the Shulchan Aruch or whatever? But I guess like, I don't know, I guess the greater you are, the more you know, the more perspective you have, and the more you can bring to the table, and not just sort of the popular opinions. Very interesting. L'may avdilei. Now, what is this chiltis soaked in water good for? Liyukra deliba. If you have a heavy heart, for whatever reason, you have some kind of a heart condition. Now, we're not talking about where it's like, a mortal danger, because then anything would be allowed on Shabbos. Rather, it's, I don't know, your heart's by a chest pains epis. Rav Acha bar Yosef chash b'yukra deliba. Now there's a Rav Acha bar Yosef who was having chest pains. Also l'kamed Mar Ukva. So he came in front of Mar Ukva. Now we saw on daf. What daf was it? Was it Kuf Chesam Beis? Yeah. So we saw on daf Kuf Chesam Beis that that, right, of course we know Shmuel was a doctor. Now, Mar Ukva was the Rosh Yeshiva, the Av Bezdin, not the Rosh Yeshiva, but the Av Bezdin at the time. And Mar Ukva and Shmuel would kind of hang out together. So we saw there on Kuf Chesem Beis that people would like ask Mar Ukva for like treatments from Shmuel, things like that. So now we see over here also in the context of Refuah, so Rav Acha bar Yosef was having chest pain, so he came to Mar Ukva. Amarle, so Mar Ukva told him, Zil shti tlasa tikle chiltza, go and drink the equivalent of the weight of 3 gold coins of this chiltza, soaked in water. Betlasa yome, and do this for 3 days, right? So for 3 days, you drink some of this soaked chiltza. Azul ishtei chamsha b'Shabbos u'mayle Shabbos. So I guess maybe this happened on a Thursday. So he went and he drank this he soaked chiltis in water on Thursday and drank it. On Friday he drank it, the tzafra, and then on Shabbos morning, also shah be midrasha. So he went, he said, oh, now what do I do? I've already drank this for 3 days, but for 2 days, now it's day 3. Am I allowed to soak this chiltis in water in order to drink it for my heart, for my chest pains? So he went to the Beis HaMedrash and he asked, Amrle, they said to him, Tana Devei Rav Ada, V'Amrila Tana Devei Marbar Rav Ada, Shose Adam Kav O Kabayim Ve'enu Choshesh. So they told him in the Beis HaMedrash, they said, well, you're allowed to drink a kav or a kabayim, it's no problem, don't worry about it. So yeah, gesundheit, you could drink this chiltis soaked in water. Amr Lahu, so Rav Acha bar Yosef said to them, Lishtos lo kamibayali, I'm not asking can I drink it. Kamibayali lishros, can I soak it in the water so that I could drink it? Amr Lahu, Rav Chia bar Oven. So Rav Chia bar Oven said to them, and of course Rav Chia bar Oven, the lion of the Chabura, he said to them, Bedidi ava uvda, so lamaise, I was once in a similar case, in a similar predicament. V'asoi shi'ilte Rav Ada bar Ahava v'le'av biyodei, and I went and I asked Rav Ada bar Ahava and he didn't know the answer. Asoi shi'ilte Rav Huna, so I went and I asked Rav Huna, v'omer, and he said, Achi ka'amar Rav, this is what Rav said, Shore b'tzonin u'maniach b'chama, you're allowed to soak this chiltis in cold water and just leave it in the sun to warm up. Kiman deshari, the Gemara says, wait, was Rav saying that like Rabbi Yossi, who says that it's mutter to soak chiltis in cold water? But we said that the Chachamim argue on Rabbi Yossi and say that you're not allowed to. So the Gemara says, no, afilu l'man da'asr. Even according to the Chachamim, who say that you're not allowed to soak chiltis in warm or cold water, hanemile eicha d'lo ishte klal. That is only where you haven't started this regiment of 3 days of drinking this. So then you shouldn't soak this chiltis in warm or cold water in order to start drinking it. Aval, hacha kevin de ishte chamsha u'mayle shabsa. But in this case, where Rav Acha bar Yosef has already drank this potion on Thursday and on Friday, ilo shasi b'Shabbos mistaken. If he doesn't also drink it for day 3, then it can actually come to a dangerous situation, and therefore it's docha Shabbos in order to soak this chiltis in water. But nonetheless, we'd rather do it with a shinoi. So instead of soaking it in warm water, soak it in cold water and put it out in the sun. Okay, now interestingly, so in the story that we just read, so we see Rav Acha bar Yosef hanging out in the circles with Rav Ada bar Ahava, with Rav Huna, right? These were sort of earlier generations of Amoraim. And now we see that he's hanging out with Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, who was like a 4th generation Amora, a little bit later. And it's interesting to note that in this case already, Rav Acha bar Yosef is an older man, and it says that he's leaning on his nephew, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. So you can kind of see how he fits in, historically. So in the first case, I guess maybe he was a younger man and he was hanging out with like Rav Ada bar Ahava and Rav Huna and Rav Chia bar Oven. And then already when he was older, then it says that he was with his nephew, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Omerle, and he said to Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Kimatinu levei Rav Safra, when we get to the house of Rav Safra, Ailina, let me go in. Kimatu, Aile. So when they got to Rav Safra's house, sure enough, Rav Acha bar Yosef went into Rav Safra's house. Ba minei, and Rav Acha bar Yosef asked from Rav Safra, Mau lichaskuse kitonisa b'Shabbata. would you be allowed to rub together linen clothing on Shabbos? Meaning, if you get linen clothing from the launderer and it's stiff, can you rub it together? So do we consider it as though he's rubbing it together just to soften it up, and that would be fine? Or maybe it'll be treated like he is trying to whiten up this linen clothing, in which case it wouldn't be allowed. It would be milabin. Wasn't that like one of the 39 malachis maybe? Wow, that was a long time ago, all this stuff. That was like half a Masechta ago. Mamish. It was like almost half a Masechta ago. Oh my gosh. Yeah, hamalabno was one of the things, so I guess maybe that would be like milabin. Holy cow. It's crazy how much we've done. So Amr lerakuche kamichavin v'shapir dami. So we say it would just be considered like he's trying to soften up the linen, and that would be acceptable. Kinafak also amle my ba'a marmine. So when he left Rav Safra's house, so Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, his nephew, asked him, Rav Acha bar Yosef, what did you ask Rav Safra? He says, I asked Rav Safra, are you allowed to rub together a linen garment on Shabbos? V'amarli shapir dami. Rav Safra told me, yeah, it's no problem. V'tibayile lemar sudra. So Rav Nachman Yitzchak said, why didn't you ask about a turban? So Rav Acha bar Yosef says, Sudra lo kami bayali. I didn't have a question about a turban. Debayi me Rav Huna ufashali, and then the Gilyon adds the Isura. Because I already asked Rav Huna about can I rub together a linen turban, and he told me that it's not allowed. V'tifshalei l'may misudra. So Rav Nachman Yitzchak said to his uncle, he said, so why don't you just apply the halacha from the turban to the clothing? So Amalei Hasa Mechze ki olude chivar hacha lo mechze ki olude chivar. He said there's a nafkamina. Your turban you wear on your head, it's very prominent, and therefore when you rub it together, it seems like you're rubbing it together in order to make it white, and therefore it's not allowed. However, what I wanted to know is, what about clothing that you're going to be covering up over, you're going to be putting other clothing on top of it? So that I was wondering, is it just considered to soften it up? To which Rav Safra said, yes, it is just to soften it up, and it's allowed. Amr of Hisda, says Rav Hisda, I kitanisa, this linen clothing, mishalfu ledida, mikanya shari, kanya mimena aser. So Rav Hisda says, so basically, the way that they would have like the equivalent of hangers was that you would take this, let's say, garment, and you would stick like a reed through one arm, and then go through the other arm, and I guess hang it up somehow. So what he was saying is that you would be allowed to remove the shirt from the pole, from this reed, but you would not be allowed to remove the reed from it, because the reed is muktzah. Okay? Rava says, but if this reed was a weaver's reed, well then it's a kli, and you can even move the reed from it. And said of Hisda, this bundle of vegetables, if it is fit for animal consumption, well then it is permitted to move it. It's not muksa v'ilo asir. And if it's not fit for animal consumption, well then it's muksa, you can't move it. Amar of Chia bar Ashi Amarav, Haitalia de Bisra, Sharla Taltule de Chavri Asir. Says of Chia bar Ashi in the name of Rav, that if you have like a string of drying meat, you're allowed to move it on Shabbos, because you can even eat it raw. But if it's of fish, then you can't, because the fish, the assumption is you cannot eat it raw, which is interesting because we currently eat fish raw. Well, if you're into that. Amr of Katina, said of Katina, Omid be'emtza amita, kilo omid bechreisa shalisha, v'lav milsahi. Says of Katina that somebody who stands in the middle of a bed that a husband and a wife sleep in, so it's as if he is stepping on the stomach of a woman. And as Rashi says, the maharher, because he's going to be having certain thoughts that we don't want him having. V'lav milsahi, and we say, yeah, but that you don't have to worry about this statement of Rav Katina. There's nothing to worry about. Okay. V'amar Rav Hisda, instead of Rav Hisda, Barbe Rab, a young student, Tizavan Yarka, who's buying vegetables. Now, I think the assumption here is that these students don't have very much money. So he's giving them advice and saying, he's saying, hey friends, when you go to buy vegetables, lizaven aricha, buy the longest vegetables. Because kisha ki kisha v'orcha memela. Because it says, here's a pro tip, all of the bundles are the same width. And therefore, if you get longer ones, you're getting more bang for your buck. Okay. And I guess it was the same price for all of them. V'amar of Hisda, bar be'rab d'zavin kanya, lizben aricha, tuna kituna v'orcha memela. He gives very similar advice with regard to buying firewood. He says, look, if you're buying firewood, if you're buying reeds to burn, so again, they're all the same price, the bundles are the same thickness, so you may as well get the longer ones, you get better bang for your buck. V'amar of Hisda, bar be'rab nefisha le'rifta, a young student who doesn't have much money and he also doesn't have much bread. Lo lechol yarka, he shouldn't eat vegetables mishum degar, because vegetables are going to make him hungrier and he's going to want to eat more bread, but he doesn't have more bread. V'amar of Hisda, ana lo be'anyusi achli yarka v'lo be'asirusi achli yarka. Rav Hisda said, look, when I was poor, I didn't eat vegetables, and when I was wealthy, I didn't eat vegetables. The Gemara in Moed Katan says that Rav Hisda was a wealthy man. It says that Rava asked for three things. One of them was to have the wealth of Rav Hisda, and he got it. Now, interestingly enough, Rava was also married to Rav Hisda's daughter. I wonder if those two are connected. Anyways, so he says that when he was poor, he didn't eat vegetables, and when Rav Hisda was wealthy, he didn't eat vegetables. Baniusi mishum degar, when I was poor, I didn't eat vegetables because it would just make me hungrier. Basirusi da amina heicha da ayil yarka leo bisra, and when I was wealthy, I didn't eat vegetables because I said, well, why should I eat vegetables if I can eat bisra v'chavre, if I can eat meat and fish? Okay, interesting. So he didn't eat vegetables. V'amar of Hisda, said of Hisda, by be'rab lo nefisha le'rifta lo livta bitzue. Rav Hisda gives some more advice. If you have these young students who don't have very much bread, so don't just eat little bits at a time. Rather, better to just eat a bunch and be satisfied rather than just having little bits that you're never really going to be satisfied. From Rav Hisda, by be'rab lo nefisha le'rifta lo livta. And it says of Hisda, if you have this young student who doesn't have much bread, so then he shouldn't be the one to, break the bread and divide it up and give it to the people in my time. How come? To lo avid by in yafeh, because he's not going to be able to do it with a big, to be able to give nice portions, because he's very concerned about the size of the food that he's apportioning. V'amar of Hisda, says of Hisda, anime ikara lo avai batsana ad shadoi yadi b'chulei mana v'ashkechi beikol tzarki. Interesting. I don't exactly know what this means, but, I know what it means literally, but I don't understand the implication. I can say it, I understand what it means literally, and I also understand the implication. I just don't really understand it. It says of Hisda that anime ikara initially, when I didn't have any money, lo avai batsana, I wouldn't break bread ad shadoi yadi b'chulei mana, until I would rummage around in the entire vessel of bread, basket of bread, and I made sure that there was enough that I needed. I mean, I think the point is that he was in a position where, it wasn't obvious that he would always have enough bread, and therefore when he would break bread, he would I don't know if it's because maybe he was hungry and he would just be very excited and see how much bread there was, or whatever it is, he kind of wouldn't just simply break bread. He would always make sure that, he wanted to see how much there was. Okay? Make sure that there was enough for his needs. V'amar of Hisda, Haiman de efshir le lemechol naima de saire v'achol dechite ka'av mishum baltashchis. Says of Hisda, if you have somebody who can't afford wheat bread, so he can, he's able to eat barley bread for that's less expensive, and instead he splurges on the wheat bread, so he's over on baltashchis because he can just eat the barley bread. He shouldn't be wasting his money. V'amar Rav Papa, says Rav Papa, Haiman de efshir le mishtei shichra over mishum baltashchis. Says Rav Papa, look, if you can drink the cheaper beer and instead you opt for the more expensive wine, so you're also over on baltashchis of being wasteful. Now, of course, as we know, Rav Papa was in the beer business, so certainly it serves him self-serving to recommend that you should prefer beer to wine. The Gemara says V'lav milsei that you don't have to worry about this. Interesting. Okay. Baltashchis de gufa adif, that we don't have to worry about this because baltashchis de gufa adif, that beer is not as healthy as wine, and also barley isn't as healthy as wheat, so therefore it would be acceptable to splurge on the wheat bread as well as the wine. V'amar of Hisda, by Beirav, Delesle Mishcha, a young student, a cash-strapped student who doesn't have oil, Nimshe b'mayed achritze, what he can do is he can go to like a pit where there's like some water that's got like algae growing on it, and it's like oily kind of water. Well, there you go. There's your oil. Va'amar Rav Hisda, by Rav Dezavan Umtza, says Rav Hisda, that this young student who's buying meat, Lisbon Unka, De'ez Beit Tlasamine Bisra, well, you should buy neck meat because you can get 3 different flavors of meat in neck meat. You can get the fatty stuff, you can get the, what was the second one? Oh, you can get the weak meat, I guess soft meat, and also kind of sinewy meat. So instead of buying 3 different types of meat, you can just get 3 for the price of 1. Buy neck meat, and you get 3 different kinds of flavors. Pro tip. V'amar of Hisda, by Birav Dezavan Ki Tunisa. If you have a young student who doesn't have money and he wants to buy clothing, so you should buy, so Lisbon Midinar Abba, so you should buy these clothing from Nahar Abba because it's the highest quality. V'nichavra kol tlas yomin, you should launder it every 30 days. Dimifatia le tresa yarcheshata, and then the clothing will last for him for 12 months. Va'ana arva, and Rav Chisda says, I can guarantee you this. My kitunisa, what exactly is this kitunisa, this linen garment? Kita na'eh, it means a good group, meaning if you dress wearing a nice garment, you will be associated in good, circles. V'amar Hisda, by Birav, Lulesiv atzipsa chadata. Hisda said that a cash-strapped student should not sit on a new reed mat, dimchalya money, because it is going to ruin his clothing. V'amar Hisda, by Birav, lo lishader money l'ushpize lechavre. A young student should not give his clothing to his host to wash for him. Dilav orach ara dumachazi be midi v'asi lemeganya, because it's not very good, because let's say there is some keri, some sperm on his clothing. Well, that wouldn't be very nice for whoever's doing his clothing to find this on his clothing. Okay. Amr luhu Rav Hisda Levante. Hisda told his daughters, Tavitz niyasan ba'ape gavraichu, be very modest in front of your husbands. Lo seichlu naima ba'ape gavraichu. Don't eat bread in front of your husbands. Interesting. Rashi says, because if you eat too much, well then, maybe your husbands might not like that very much. Interesting. Lo seichlun yarka belelia, don't eat vegetables at night, and as Rashi says, because it will give you bad breath. Lo seichlun tamir belelia v'lo sishtun shichra belelia, don't eat dates and drink beer at night, and Rashi says because it might upset your stomach, and we don't want that in front of your husbands. V'lo tifanun eicha demafne gavraichu, and do not go to the bathroom where your husbands go to the bathroom, because also it might create an uncomfortable situation for you and your husband. V'chikakare abava inish lo semun manu elamani. And if a man knocks on the door, do not say, who is it, in the male form, rather say, who is it, in the female form. Ki'ilu, that it's as if like you don't want to be accustomed to welcoming men into the house, so even though it's a man, kind of refer as if you were talking to a woman, as if you're opening the door for a woman. Fine. Naked marganisa b'chadar yadeh, v'chur b'chadar yadeh, marganisa achvilu, v'chur lo achvilu, adam mitztayran, v'hadar achvilu. And when you are in bed with your husband, so what you should do is, first you should cover your breasts with one hand, and cover your vagina with the other hand, and then first let your husband see your breasts, and then only later allow him to see your vagina, and then have sex, and that will sort of be the proper order of events for you and your husband. Okay. Ein sholin esa karshinin. So the Mishnah had said that we do not soak vetch in water, because that will separate the good stuff from, that will kind of separate the vetch and the other stuff. Masisin lo ki aitana. So the Mishnah is not like the following Tana. The Tanya, as we learn in a Brisa, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer in Mashgichin b'chavra kol ikr. So this Mishnah is not like the following brisa, which says that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says that we do not use the sifter at all, because our Mishnah said that while you wouldn't pour water into the vetch to separate the things, you can use a sifter to scoop up the vetch and put it in the trough. But Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says do not use a sifter whatsoever. Okay, so it's not like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Says the Mishnah, Gorfin milifnei aptam u'misalkin l'tzdadim mipnei arei divri abdosa. Okay, so it says abdosa that you'd be allowed to shovel away from before. So if you have a cow and you're fattening up the cow so you can slaughter it, so what you can do is in the trough, in the feeding trough, you can scrape away before you put in more food. You can scrape away any sort of things that might be unappetizing for the cow. So you can scrape that away on Shabbos, and if in this pen there's like hay and stuff that the cow is eating, and you don't want the cow to like step on it and have its dung on it and stuff like that, so you can kind of move these things away so that the cow will eat properly. The Chacham say that you would not be allowed to move these things around. B'Shabbos, you can take food from one animal and give it to the other animal on Shabbos. It's fine because the animals are not so makpid and they will eat it anyways. So it's acceptable. It's like you're just putting food in front of the animal. So Reb Dosa had said that you can, if you have like food in the trough, you can move it around and you can like scrape out the trough before putting in more food. And Reb Dosa also said that if you have this like hay like around the animal, so you can also move that around so that it won't be stepping in it and have its own like dung on it, and it won't want to eat it. So Rav Dosa says you can kind of do these two different things. The Chachamim say that it's asur. The question is, do the Chachamim say that both of them are asur? One of them is asur, none of them are asur? Like what's going on over here? So Ibailu, so they asked, Rabbanan Aresha Plige, do they argue on the first statement of Rav Dosa? Or Seifa Plige, do they argue on the second statement of Rav Dosa? Or Tarvayu Plige, do they argue on both statements of Rav Dosa? Tashma, Kamanir, Ditani, Vachachamim Omrim, Echadzeh, Vechadzeh, Lo Yisakenu L'Tzdadin. So we have a brayta that says that the Chachamim say that whether it's the Reisha, right, which is scraping out the trough before putting in the food for the animals, or whether it's the Seifa, which is moving the hay from around the animals if there's lots of it, the Chacham say do neither of them. Amar of Hisda, Machlokas be'evus shel karka, aval be'evus shel kli, teviakol mutter. Rav Hisda says that the machlokas between Rav Dosa and the Chachamim about whether or not you can scrape away the trough before putting in more food is only in a trough that is dug into the ground. That is where there's machlokas. But if the trough was in a kli, everyone would agree that it would be permitted. The concern with the ground is that you might come to flatten out holes. If there are holes, you'll fill them in. And I think we said that would be an issue of choresh, I think, of harvesting. I think we said in the field. Ve'evu shel karka mi'ika leman deshari. But 1 second, if this trough is in the ground, is there anybody who would say that it's permitted? Ha kamash ve'gumos. You're going to be evening out holes. Ela yidmar hachi yidmar. Rather, if you're going to state it in the following way. Amar of Hisda machlokas be'evus shel kli. The machlokas is when it comes to a trough that is in a vessel. Aval be'evus shel karka divyakol aser. But if the trough was in the ground, everyone would say that it is forbidden because we're concerned that you might fill in holes. But if it's in a vessel, the Chachamim still say that it's not allowed because they make a gzera out of that you might come to fill in holes if it's in the ground. Fine. The Mishnah said you could take food from one animal and give it to another animal on Shabbos because the animals are not makbid if they eat it anyway, so it's not a big deal. But come in here, right? Tana Chada, we have one brayta that says Nodlim lifnei behema shapia yafeh v'noslim lifnei behema shapia ra. We have one brayta that says that you would be allowed to take food from one animal that has a good mouth, that it has good mouth skills or good mouth etiquette, and you can take that food and give it in front to an animal that has bad mouth etiquette. V'tani idach, we have another brayta that says Notlim lifnei behema shapia ra v'noslim lifnei behema shapia yafeh. We have another brayta that says you could dafka take food from an animal that has a bad mouth etiquette and put it in front of an animal that has good mouth etiquette. So which one is it? Do you take the food from the bad mouth etiquette, from the good mouth etiquette? What is it? Amar Abai, idi v'idi, mikame chamra lekame Torah shaklinan, mikame Torah lekame chamra lo shaklinan. So Abai says, no, both of these brises are saying the same exact thing, which is, mikame chamra lekame Torah, that taking food from a donkey and giving it to a ox, meaning, I think the point is that, the donkey is not eating anymore. It has enough to eat, or it has more than enough, so you want to take this food and now give it to the ox. We say that would be acceptable, right? Mikame Torah lekame chamra lo shaklinan, but we would not take food from an ox and put it in front of a donkey. How come? Here we go. When we say that you're allowed to take food from an animal that has good mouth etiquette, well, that is talking about bechamor. The animal with good mouth etiquette is a donkey delesle rire. He doesn't spit and slobber in its food. And you can put it in front of the animal that has bad mouth etiquette. That is a cow that slobbers on its food. So you can take from the donkey and give it to the cow because the cow will eat it. But the cow who slobbers on its food, you can't give slobbery food to the donkey because the donkey won't eat it. Okay? When we say that you're allowed to take from an animal that has bad mouth etiquette, well, this is also talking about the donkey. Because it's talking about a donkey that doesn't pay attention to what it eats. It might eat like branches and sticks, it can eat anything. When we say you could put it in front of an animal that has good mouth etiquette, meaning that it'll only eat food, it won't eat other kind of stuff. But both the pia yafe and the pia ra, they're both talking about the chamor and also the cow. It just depends if it's talking about slobbering or if it's talking about eating anything. But the point is that you can take food from a donkey and give it to a cow, but not from a cow and give it to a donkey. Friends, that was the Kuf Mem of Masechta Shabbos. Let us review what we discussed. So, at the beginning we were talking about mixing mustard, and we had different options. Maybe mix it with kli, maybe mix it with your hands. So Rav said you can mix it with a kli, but not with your hands, because you mix it better with your hands, and that's how you do it during the week. Shmuel says, what do you mean? It's not donkey food. You don't mix mustard with your hands during the week. Rather, you mix mustard with a kli during the week. So if you want to mix it on Shabbos, do it with your hands. Rabbi Yochanan said that whether it's with your kli, whether it's your hands, it is permitted. Rabbi Elazar said whether it's with the kli, whether it's your hands, it's forbidden. Abai and Rava said that the halacha is not like Rabbi Yochanan, who says that either way it's permitted. Then Rabbi Yochanan ended up changing his mind to say that that it's also no matter what. And Abai and Rava were like, okay, we hold like him. In the end, Mar Zutra said, look, Lamaisa, you'd be allowed to mix together this mustard however you want, as long as you don't mix it really well and knead it, but just to mix it kind of regularly would be permitted. And I think that that's kind of similar to making tchina on Shabbos. Then we talked about all sorts of interesting recipes, right, with how to deal with cress and oil and vinegar and mint. Very interesting. Talk about these interesting wine things that you add honey and spices. Very cool. And that drink that they would have after the spa with Rav Yosef and Mar Ukva. Then we talked about soaking chiltis in warm water. We said that that is good for a heavy heart. We had a story with Rav Acha Bar Yosef, who went in front of Mar Ukva recommended that he have 3 days of eating this stuff, of drinking this drink. Then on the third day was Shabbos, and he wanted to figure out, can he drink this? So, interesting. So in the end, they said that he would be allowed to, since it is, since he did it on day 1 and day 2, by day 3 it would be life-threatening if he doesn't drink it. So that would be acceptable. Interesting. Okay, so back to the soaking the schiltis in water. So Rav Ada Narsha says to Rav Yosef that you be chayav achatas if you soak it in warm water. Abaye says, what are you talking about? Soaking things is not chayav a korban chatas. If you soak meat, you're not chayav a korban chatas. No, the issue is uvdin dechol. We don't want you doing things the way you do it during the week, so it's also midrabanan. According to the Chachamim, both soaking in cold and hot water would be a problem, whereas according to Rav Yosef, only in warm water is a problem. Cold water would be acceptable. Talk about rubbing a linen garment. So as long as it's okay, because it's just going to be to soften the garment, that's okay. But if it's your turban, it's not okay, because it's going to be in order to make it whiter. Rav Hisda gave all sorts of advice to young Torah students as well as to his daughters, how they may act with their husbands. And then we had a Mishnah which talks about moving food from in front of animals on Shabbos. We say from donkeys to oxen would be okay, because donkeys don't slobber on their food, whereas oxen do. So the donkeys won't want to eat slobbery food, but the oxen will eat donkey food. That's okay. Friends, that was Daf Kuf Mem of Masechta Shabbos. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a great day. Peace out.